Hello and welcome back to Miss Hannah Loves Grammar. In this video I want to build your confidence around the vocabulary you can use across both English Language Paper 1 and 2, across both sections of each paper, to ensure that the examiner understands you, because let's face it, we know that communication matters, especially in a qualification designed to show that you can read and write. But this video stems from an understanding that both of these papers are also testing you on your ability to understand specific nuanced emotions that are found in each text. Because emotions can colour how we say what we think. And let me just comment for a moment. As an examiner on paper 2 over several years, I can vouch for the fact I am bored of students simply saying happy or sad. There's a whole range of emotions in between those that need our attention. So in this video, I want us to address the fact that not having the right words to say can mean that we're stopped from success and stopped from being clear. So hopefully this video can help you. I'm going to give you a psychological theory that you can write notes on and steal the major vocabulary from. I'll offer you ways to remember the words associated with the major emotions found within the wheel of emotions that it is alluding to. And I'll be giving you opportunities to consider how you can implant that vocabulary into both papers 1 and 2 and embed it into your writing too. So, let's begin. So this is Plutchik's emotional wheel. It's interesting to us because it shows emotional intelligence. His role as a professor stemmed around the idea that we need to have a really nuanced emotional understanding to understand each other. And to some extent, this might seem really distant from your English language exam, but let me just tell you, every time the examiner is asking you to comment on the writer's intentions, whether explicitly or implicitly, this vocabulary here is at the heart of what you could be commenting on, to avoid falling into the trap of just saying happy or sad. So I'll be coming back to each segment of this particular diagram. But I'd like you to acknowledge that these are the major words that you should be employing across your writing and your responses in the reading sections. You can already see that in paper 2, you could be commenting on viewpoints and perspectives with this. But in paper 1, you may well be using question 4 to consider the response to a statement using nuanced vocabulary around emotional intelligence, like this. Let's dig a little bit deeper. The core 8 emotions that stem around this wheel of emotion are what I'm going to zoom in on. And I'm going to offer you synonyms on each of these words so that you know how to place these emotions into your writing, and it stops you from sounding really repetitive. But take a moment to read these before I dig even further into how you can use each of these very emotively laden words into your writing. So, as you can see in the red petal, if you like, of our wheel, anger is the core emotion. We're saying to fight against problems, but at its most intensive form, it's rage, and a more mild form of this anger is annoyance. But here are some other synonyms that you might choose to consider. Someone being vexed, someone being irritated, frustrated, resentful, indignant. Now, the power of me giving you these synonyms is to add fluidity to your writing. As opposed to saying they are angry, they seem angry, you're offering alternatives and showing your sophistication by knowing that variety of vocabulary. But equally, if you are writing as someone who is angry, you have other verbs you can use or adjectives to support your own writing. Now, at the end of this video, I have a list of ways in which all of these words can be applied to paper 1 and paper 2, obviously respective to the source you're given. But as I plough through these words, they are all incredibly relevant to both papers. So next up is joy. Now I've zoomed in on the yellow petal. And I've said here to remind us of what's important. At its most intense form, we're saying ecstasy, not the drug, but that intense sense of delight, pleasure, bliss, happiness, and rapture. And serenity is the most mild form of that, the sense of peace in your own heart. Now, anticipation, to look forward to or plan. In that most intense sense of that word, we've got vigilance, which in many ways embodies slight worry and intensive focus on something. So we've got hope, the idea that you're predicting what might happen. There's a caution with that one, forecasting even, to be in suspense over something, and the sense of expectation. The orange petal is probably the most difficult to take any further with ambitious vocabulary, I've found. But if you're looking for anticipation, I suspect caution is another word I would add in. Now, this is the most intensely overused of our language, sadness or sad. And here I've said to connect us with those we love. It's often a sense of loss. At its most intense form, I put grief. And Plutchik is quite clear that the most mild form is something called being pensive, just thoughtful. But I'm dwelling on the idea of sadness as misery. Maybe it's regret at what you've done wrong, sorrow, melancholy, a word that definitely needs to be spelt correctly, and woe. Now, disgust. I said to reject what is unhealthy. And it's, in this case, the bright pink petal. So the most intense form of disgust is loathing, hate, really. You can't bear to look at it. And the most mild form of disgust is boredom, or maybe even apathy. You're so kind of keen to reject it, you don't care anymore. But other words that we might choose to use include horror, revulsion, abhorrence, to just despise something, and the idea that it offends us or sickens us. Now to a very different emotion, that of surprise, to focus on new situations. Now there's a kind of positivity around the most intense form of surprise, which is amazement. So that's to be astounded, stunned, shocked, stupefied, confounded. Now, surprise is interesting because, as you know, surprises can be both good or bad. So whilst amazement might be the most intensive form in a more positive outlook, it could also be incredibly debilitating and paralysing. It's worthy of note. Okay. Fear. To protect us from danger, obviously, it's our natural instinct. Its most intense form is terror, and the most cautious version, the palest of the green, is apprehension, so a slight worry. You'll see some overlap between these emotions, but that's healthy and important for you to have in your mind. So fear is echoing alarm, dread, distress, panic, consternation, all legitimate feelings you may have ahead of your exam, but don't worry, these words will all be used in your armour, so you'll do fine. Finally, trust. To connect with people who help, hopefully people like me, who knows. Now, in the most intense form of trust, you've got admiration, when you look up to somebody or something and you value it. And the mildest form of it is just to accept it. But the other words I would use commonly associated with trust is to have faith in the belief. Reliance, confidence, assured. All of this vocabulary might seem simple, but spelt correctly, applied correctly, as I'll now unpack for you, it's the key to ensuring you are incredibly successful at every level within your writing and your responses in the reading section. So, I'm now going to rattle through paper 1 uses and then paper 2 uses, and I hope this is clear, crisp, and ready for you to go away and employ the devices here and the language incredibly perceptively. So, for paper 1, Of course, you should annotate the source with the connotations of each emotion in the reading time. Specifically, question 4, it demands you respond to a statement that will have within it some sort of laden emotive language, and you can use the words around the wheel that are relevant to back up your evidence and form your topic sentences. My suggestion is that you learn the most ambitious alternatives of emotive language. So as opposed to saying joy, instead talk about ecstasy, talk about other really positive vocabulary that you can use. As opposed to saying surprise, you could talk about being stupefied or confounded. It adds not just to your responses in the reading section, but it fuels your creative writing and stops you sounding repetitive. If anything, with the words that are most ambitious, build them into your plan so you make sure you use them. And try using each word in a sentence before the actual exam to ensure that you're using it correctly. Why not leave it in the comments section below so I can approve it for you? Now to move on to paper 2 uses. In the margins of each source, I would identify the emotions across each text. Does it shift? Why? Same is true for paper 1, but it's even more important in paper 2, which is calling itself the viewpoint and perspectives paper. And for example, in question 2 in paper 2, it expects a summary of differences. It might be powerful to comment on the emotional differences between whoever our speakers are. In question 4, the demands are very high on comparing the differences and similarities between these two texts, both in language and structure. And having a strong grip on emotion can be really powerful to ensure that your differences are very nuanced. So I would annotate for language that proves the emotions you've identified down the margins of each source. Now, obviously, question 5 is viewpoint writing. It needs impassioned and extremely astute emotive language. So show variety of emotions within the same range, as opposed to just talking about sadness. You could talk about grief, you can talk about melancholy and woe. That's one example, but it's important because accuracy on pinpointing mood and tone in your writing or in the writing of others is confirming your ability to be an exceptional linguist. Now, in terms of your writing, accuracy on pinpointing the mood and tone of your own writing is confirmed by the way you plan with vocabulary like this. I have absolute belief in your ability, and if anything, I'm hoping that you are in a state of serenity as you go forth. Why not subscribe to Miss Hannah Loves Grammar for all things English, literary and grammatical?